and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news this week, President Trump was crowing, you probably saw him, about packing the judiciary with ultra-conservatives, and he's not lying for a change.
There's a first. Vice President Mike Pence was pointedly greeted with rainbows in Iceland.
Two more trans women of color were murdered this week that we know about in Baltimore and in Florida.
And in the Bronx, Abel Cedeno, the bullied gay teen who fought back with a knife, got 14 years in prison for manslaughter and assault.
I was there and we'll have a report. A gay kiss in a comic book stirred up a huge controversy in Brazil.
And Sarajevo held its first Pride March, and you'll never guess which American joined in.
Activists disrupted the opening of the U.S. Conference on AIDS and then got to meet with the head of the CDC.
Florida Senator Rick Scott has been exposed for rejecting HIV prevention funds when he was the governor of Florida, as HIV infection rates were skyrocketing.
Right, those were federal funds he didn't want. I'm going to review Betrayal, Harold Pinter's play with Tom Hiddleston on Broadway.
And our very special guest is Bruce Sussman, who's going to tell us about his new musical, Harmony, coming to New York. It's a collaboration with his longtime co-worker Barry Manilow, and it's coming at the beginning of next year, and he's going to tell us all about it.
Okay. So, Trump has made this the centerpiece of his presentations these days. He even tweeted about it this week, how many federal judges he has appointed. You can see the tweet there. It is a phenomenal number. But then when he was talking about it to the press this week, I have to thank Obama for this gift of all these openings on the court. Well, you can thank Mitch McConnell for that, because he wouldn't confirm any of them.
Yeah, hideous. 160 judges so far. He's predicting they'll get to 200 by the end of his first term. And all I can say is thank God they're not majorities yet on these courts, or most of them anyway, and we still have time to stop him.
Well, they got a majority on the Supreme Court, even though they're not all Trump judges. They're sympathizers.
That is true.
All right. So, and what else did he do this week? He's got this new regulation to throw 3.6 million of you off of food stamps, many of them in Trump country. He's looking to cut refugee admissions by half over the now.
And of course, he's diverting all those funds to building the wall, which is taking money from districts, Republican districts all over the country.
But he has merited the endorsement of homophobic former Grey's Anatomy star Isaiah Washington, who came out for his reelection. Isaiah Washington's an African-American guy, and he says, well, I've seen a little change under the Democrats from my people.
Wow. I always worried that we've been too hard on Isaiah Washington. I do not think so anymore.
Well, sometimes when he paid for that homophobic remark in the studio.
On the set of
He did. And then I think that sort of
Anatomy.
Sometimes puts people on the thing, okay, you think I'm your enemy? I'm your enemy. That happens. Because
that was a long time ago. I have to feel that this is sincere on his part.
They're repealing a ban on bee-killing pesticides in wildlife refuges. How are we going to eat?
Well, they're killing all the auto emission standards that California worked out with the car companies.
They're bringing an antitrust suit against auto companies that want to be environmentally conscious by complying with Florida, because they're doing it together. That's the thing. There's going to be a hearing about this in the Judiciary Committee.
How about an antitrust suit against Trump and McConnell working together?
Well, Uninsured Americans are up to 27.5 million. That's 8.5% of the population, up for the first time since the Obama passed the Affordable Care Act.
I feel they know
2010.
these things already.
Now, that special House race that just took place in North Carolina, yes, the Democrat lost in a heavily Republican district, but it swung more than 10 points to the Democrat. And if all the districts swing 10 points to the Democrat, Donald Trump loses the state of North Carolina.
All right. I'll hold my breath on that
All
one.
right.
There is, there is fight back here and there, and I want to thank Representative Jennifer Wexton, a Democrat of Virginia, who's introduced a bill that would stop HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department, from instituting the rule allowing anti-trans discrimination in shelters.
I mean, I know
won't get anywhere.
I know
but
the
it's
Trump
nice of her
administration
to
throws
try.
roadblocks in front of every investigation and everything, but the Democrats have got to get more aggressive.
Well, I see little signs of that. I want more, of course, but I'm happy to see our Congressman Jerry Nadler on TV more and more talking about the work they're doing.
They don't have trouble standing up to them in Iceland. So Mike Pence makes a visit to Iceland, and the president of that country greeted him wearing a rainbow bracelet.
As he had also done in greeting Putin a while ago.
Good.
Because of Putin's, anti-homophobia, homosexuality law.
And the other picture there, a couple of local businesses that were on the parade route, not the parade route, but the route for Mike Pence, put up multiple rainbow flags. But, Mike just sees this as due to his strong Christian faith.
Well, you remember that last week that the White House was claiming that Pence is meeting with the out-gay Prime Minister of Ireland, Varadkar.
How could he be anti-gay if he did that?
Exactly. Well, Chasten Buttigieg said, look, I've met with a lot of homophobes, and they haven't changed just because I've met with them. Pence is not changing just because he's met with Varadkar.
The streets were barricaded in Ireland, in County Clare, but nobody turned out to greet Pence there. But speaking in front of the Irish Prime Minister, who we refer to, the Taoiseach, Pence praised Boris Johnson and Brexit, two things threatening peace and trade in Ireland. Now, wait a minute. The ancient order of Hibernians publicly criticized Pence. They were greatly troubled by his remarks. These are the people who kept us out of the St. Patrick's Day parade for 25 years.
They do this on purpose, Pence and Trump and all those people. They are just trying to get under our skin.
Well, it is upsetting. What are we supposed to do? Just ignore it?
Well, first of all, we're going to have these Democratic debates, and we're taping on Wednesday. And I should note that we're taping on September 11th, Wednesday. Yes. And as we do that, we, of course, remember gay heroes like Mark Bingham on United Flight 93, who helped bring that flight down before it could crash into something huge in D.C. and kill even more people.
Even thanked by John McCain at a ceremony. And, of course, Michael Judge, the fire chaplain, a gay guy who went down there and died there.
And many others.
Many others.
Certainly the thousands who died and the thousands who helped, and particularly those members of our communities.
18 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, so
the debates.
There are two LGBT-focused debates coming up, but they're not debates. They are forums, and they will be sequential interviews with candidates, which will take a long time. The first one is on September 20th, next week. Yes. And that one it will not be televised, but it will be broadcast online. It's being held at Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. There are 10 candidates who've already agreed to do it. GLAAD, the One Iowa, the local LGBT statewide group there. A number of other, the Advocate, I think, is involved in that. But 10 major candidates are showing up, Biden and Booker and Pete Buttigieg and Castro and Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren and Marianne Williamson and Amy Klobuchar and Joe Sestak.
Well, the other one...
That's at 7 o'clock, I don't know if that's Eastern or Central, in Iowa on September 20th.
And the other one is sponsored by the Human Rights Campaign on October the 10th, the eve of National Coming Out Day. They're going to let CNN reporters ask the questions and audience members. This is out in California at the Novo in LA, accepting so far Biden, Buttigieg, Castro, Harris, Warren, and Klobuchar. And it's an audience of invited guests, no tickets.
Yeah, you can send in questions, but they are restricting the audience, and people are a little upset about that. This echoes the HRC forum held in 2008, where Melissa Etheridge asked the questions, and that was somewhat controversial.
I remember.
And some of the answers from the candidates were a little controversial, too. But these are, so September 20th, October 10th, forums, individually questioned candidates on LGBTQ issues. I don't expect anything too
you never know.
Unpredictable.
You never know.
Well, the question is, what should the questions be?
No.
Think about that.
You can send them in. You go to the HRC website for that one on October 10th. Now, if all this stuff about Trump upsets you as much as it upsets us...
I was just going to note that Mayor Pete is up with his first TV ad. You can go to his website.
It's his first TV ad?
Yes. His first TV ad.
Really? Go to his website and see it.
Yes.
There's going to be a big march against Trump because he's speaking at the UN on the 24th. So on Monday night evening, September 23rd at 5:30, starting in Bryant Park, there at 42nd Street and 6th Avenue, we will all be coming out to protest. He should be protested wherever he goes.
Exactly. In Arizona, the Navajo Nation has voted to endorse the Equality Act, acknowledging both its own Two-Spirit population and the LGBTQ plus population as a whole. This is an important endorsement for the Equality Act in the U.S. Congress.
Great.
Thank you.
We told you about Jerry Falwell Jr. and Liberty University and the corruption there and all that stuff. Well, there was a big story in, what was it, Politico. Yeah. Now, at this point, Liberty University is a $3 billion enterprise because they have a lot of online students. And of course, family members profit from the businesses that they generate. But insiders are now leaking compromising documents and emails. And
beyond the pool boy stories.
Oh, yes. Reports of how Falwell brags about his penis size and shared photos of his wife in a French maid costume. Ooh la la. Politico put up pictures of him at a nightclub in Florida, in Miami, and he said, that's Photoshopped. So they came up with 4 more photos from their...
and the photographer.
Yes. This is at a club called Wall, where his son Trey was. He insisted he wasn't there.
Well, Liberty University students are forbidden to go to places like that.
Or drink alcohol.
Yes.
All that stuff.
Yeah.
So this guy,
I
Trump's
hope
big
this
supporter.
this is right before
Trump
his
will
fall.
make him Secretary of Health and Human Services or something.
And there's a fascinating piece of video online posted by a well-known drag performer in West Hollywood, Lonnie Reinhardt. He was performing at a club in West Hollywood, and he noticed that Aaron Schock, the former congressman and closet case and Republican and anti-LGBTQ issues voter.
And Downton Abbey devotee.
Yes.
Because he got in trouble for using all these campaign funds to redo his office like Downton Abbey.
Yeah, like red velvet walls and stuff. He was in the club. And so first, Lonnie was furious and wanted to just call him out and scream at him and whatever. And then he decided, no, well, he said something without using Aaron Schock's name. But then somebody who was with Aaron Schock went over and said something, and he ended up going over to talk to him. And so his posting online describes all this and describes the conversation he had with Aaron Schock, which included Aaron Schock saying, you know, I was outed and it was very painful and my family rejected me. They were very upset, and I am writing a statement, all of which is very interesting. So Lonnie doesn't know what to think of this quite. And he says, you know, I just want to put this up to say you can have conversations with people, but it would be nice if he did write a confessional statement and did some good works.
Sure. I mean, you know, Harvey Fierstein, who will soon be seen as Bella Abzug in a play that he wrote about Bella Abzug, posted about that conversion therapy guy who came out and said he was sorry. And Harvey's not ready to forgive him. I think he's getting into character as Bella, who, you know, could, you know, very tough. Very tough. Very tough. We loved her. And I'm looking forward to the show. But yeah, I mean, look, do I hope he comes around? Some of these people never give up their conservative politics. I mean,
yes.
Well, anyway.
Well, it's hard for us to imagine anyone having conservative politics, but you have to take it on faith that they actually believe this stuff.
But there was news also about Aaron Schock, you know, about the investigation into him of the criminal charges about his misuse of those campaign funds. And after completing a probationary period and paying $68,000 that he used for personal expenses and pay back taxes, he gets a sweetheart deal and he gets his record cleared and he gets to run for office again.
Aye. Well, a lot of New York City former council members are going to run for office again because the term limits only apply to sequential terms, and you can go away and then come back and run again.
But aren't we losing all the gays?
Yes, we are.
All 5 gays are up.
Yes, but Marty Gould Cummings, drag star, is running for the city council.
Out of order, but yes, we can.
32 years old, on the Nightlife Advisory Board and on the Community Board. Now, the election is not until 2021. We have a picture. We're calling for it a little out of order. I don't know whether the control room can get it up, but if you can, we are losing all 5 out council members. LGBTQ council members. There is Marty. And
Marty's like what? Like 31?
32.
32.
And
Happy birthday, Marty.
Has been an excellent activist and would be a great addition to the city council.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens
All right.
there.
Let's maybe go back to some of the bad news that we have here about the trans women who have been murdered this week.
Yes.
The first one we have for you, and again, this is almost a weekly occurrence, although they say this is the 17th and 18th. In Baltimore, 17-year-old Bailey Reeves, an African-American trans woman, was gunned down leaving a party last Sunday night. She was also the 5th person shot in Baltimore that night. So.
But let's not gloss over the fact she was 17 years old.
Right.
17 years old and is now dead.
And the other one was in Clewiston, Florida. A black trans woman, B. Love Slater, 21, murdered. Her body found in a burned vehicle. A vigil was held on September 6th in Pahokee. There are demands for a wider investigation into it. And then I was in the Bronx for the sentencing of Abel Cedeno. This is the bullied Bronx teen who in 2017 brought a knife to school to defend himself. And when he was attacked, he used it very inartfully.
He had been bullied for years. He had complained. The school had refused to do anything to help him.
There he is sitting there in the colored hair.
He had dropped out of school and was told to go back and told he could not transfer to another school.
3 times, even though his mother and he asked for a transfer, get me out of this crazy place. No, you got to finish your school here. When I read the story, here's what disturbs me most about it, is that when the mother or he complained about the bullying, or if something happened in a class, you faggot, you girl, you know, all this stuff, pussy, etc., the teacher never said anything or did anything. They never even engaged the students in it. It's like, oh, it's too much. You know, we're going to talk about soccer games later.
Terror, but terror of the kids.
So he dropped out of school for a year. Yeah. Now look, you know, again, a big mistake carrying around a knife in school, although he's trying to do it for protection. And it's horrible that these kids were killed. One was killed and the other one was slashed. But 14 years he was sentenced to. He was denied youthful offender status, which means he'll be a convicted felon for the rest of his life.
14 years, it could have been worse. It could have, the prosecution was asking for 30 years.
Well, the mother of the deceased said, I wanted 50 years. I'll take 14. Now there are civil suits around all this on both sides. Even Abel and his family are suing over the way he was treated.
And he's appealing his sentence,
well,
correct?
they're looking at an appeal, yes, because the judge just didn't seem to take the context. In fact, he said, that you're being bullied. I have no doubt that you were bullied, but it doesn't justify a murderous rage. Well, let me tell you what happens to a lot of kids when they get into a murderous rage. They get an AR-15 and they go to school and they shoot everybody.
And I don't think murderous rage is the appropriate description of this. I think this was fear.
Right.
I don't think he was enraged. I think he was afraid. And they were throwing things at him. They were coming at him.
And when he confronted the class, which he did, they just jumped over their seats and started wailing on him. So he uses the knife, again, not knowing how to use a knife so that he might just defend himself. But he just goes like this, and it happens to pierce the other kid's heart. In many states, he would be considered justified, but not in New York.
And the judge said you may have been bullied, but not by these guys.
Well,
he was bullied by these guys.
That day, and he knew who they were, that they were gang members, which they deny. All of this may come out in a civil suit. Anyway, I feel for Abel. We're going to try to see, now that he's being sent to prison, because he was doing okay in Rikers and getting an education in the city jail, but in the state prison system, it's very rough, and we have to protect people in prison, especially gay people.
We also have a
trans
picture
people.
of the murdered boy's mother,
right?
who
Luna Dennis, and her lawyer is Sanford Rubenstein, who you may know from TV, because he's a very successful lawyer.
And he's been quite vicious in going after Abel.
Right. They wanted 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, she lost her son. I'm not, I'm tremendously sympathetic to that.
Right.
But
all right.
Whatever. All right.
In better news, a bail fund has been established in the wake of the death of Layleen Polanco, who died in Rikers this year, unable to make $500 bail. An IT professional, Martin Kaminer, put up the seed money, working with Chase Strangio at ACLU and somebody at Lambda. It's called the Emergency Release Fund, and it's already gotten 6 inmates out.
That's great. In Las Vegas, the LGBT center there was vandalized. We have a picture.
Big picture of the center. It's a huge place there in Las Vegas. It's a big building.
Yeah, but someone in big letters wrote "fag" on the door and what looks like spray paint.
Very threatening stuff. Threatening stuff.
Yeah, people are upset with us. In Bakersfield, California, some kids with MAGA hats, Trump acolytes, invaded a meeting of the Gay Straight Alliance, or what are we calling? What does GSA stand for these days? We've reinterpreted that.
Yeah. Gender something.
Yeah, at Frontier High School.
Gender and sexuality, I think.
Okay. These kids just burst into this meeting to intimidate and attack the kids at that high school. And in New Jersey, a lesbian couple gets into an Uber. One of them plants a
kiss on the cheek.
Yeah, and the Uber driver loses it.
I'm a Christian, get out, she says. I'm a Christian, get out.
And so the lesbians take out a phone and start filming this. Again, you can find this online.
Go ahead, film me. I'm standing up for Christ.
Yes, and says, you mean you're throwing us out of here because we're gay? Yes, I am. And so the lesbians complained to Uber, and the driver has now been fired.
Oh, they did finally. The original story didn't have that.
Well, a viewer sent me this story, and I thought, she's picking up something from a year and a half ago. We've heard this story before, but I looked it up, and no, it happened again.
Well, it's going to keep happening. And then follow up on that situation in Boston where there was the straight pride march.
Yes.
And this judge, Richard Sinnott, at the trial of the protesters, he not only barred them from the city, but he jailed their lawyer, Susan Church, because he claimed, "You were speaking over me."
Oh my
Prison. She was the attorney of the year at the National Lawyers Guild, and they got to get this guy off the bench. He's out of control.
These are the anti-straight pride protesters,
Right.
our side. Both the prosecution and the defense had asked that the charges against them be dismissed, but the judge refused. So the cops are very happy now because they feel they've been vindicated for all their rough treatment of the protesters. Ayanna Pressley, congressional representative from Massachusetts, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are supporting the bail fund that has been put together for those protesters.
By the way, speaking of out gay candidates, in Brooklyn, the out gay district leader, Joshua Pierre, who's one of my Facebook friends, is challenging State Senator Kevin Parker. He's the one who gets in trouble for his temper all the time.
Exactly.
In the 21st district, he would be the first out African-American state senator in New York.
In LA, they're going to have West Hollywood Bi Pride on September 21st, 1 p.m., West Hollywood Park. Mark your calendars for that. And
Can we talk about some people we lost?
Yes.
Tell us about Chris March.
Well, Chris March was a fantastic dress designer, fashion designer, who was on an early iteration of Project Runway, and he came up with Beach Street Babylon. Wait, am I screwing
Beach
that
Blanket
up?
Babylon
Beach Blanket
in
Babylon, San Francisco, which is wild, crazy, like the whole skyline of San Francisco on hats. And he came out of that tradition and really wild stuff. Mr. March's contributions included a towering Martha Stewart-themed headpiece complete with a pie, a lobster, a pot of sunflowers, and a copy of Martha Stewart Living. But on Project Runway and beyond, he did much more controlled work. Put that picture up again if you can. Including dressing Meryl Streep a couple of times for award shows. She's in one of the pictures in that picture. There on the upper right, that's Meryl Streep.
He dressed Lady Gaga.
And Beyonce. And he was I didn't know him, but he appeared to be a fantastic guy on Project Runway and really a fantastic designer.
Now, he fell and hit his head in 2017. He was put into a medically induced coma. He came out of it. He was just partly paralyzed, but he died of a heart attack.
At age 56, a real tragedy to lose Chris March.
And then Sally Floyd, someone I hadn't heard of, but who has affected your life. She's a computer scientist, 69 years old. Gallbladder cancer. She invented something called RED, Random Early Detection, which is the algorithm that basically lets the internet work and lets information flow smoothly. Before that, there was apparently a lot of congestion on the internet. She is survived by her wife, Carol Leta.
They met in 1983 and were married in 2013. And Sally was described as a very gentle soul who would just be very soft-spoken, but
she had to retire in about
effect.
2009 due to illness, but Parkinson's, I think.
A follow-up, Grand Rapids, Michigan, the drag syndrome kids who were putting on this show there, Down syndrome people who were doing drag.
Yeah.
The show went on. It was very successful. They had to add an extra show that, in fact, sold out.
And the ACLU is suing the guy who canceled them for discrimination, because he said, you said you were solicitous of people with Down syndrome being discriminated against or used, and they said you wouldn't do this under any other circumstance.
Yeah. And that's what I have there.
All right, let's get into
international news.
Well, goodbye, Robert Mugabe. Dead at the age of 95. Man, only the good die young. The guy who liberated Rhodesia in 1980 and established Zimbabwe. but quickly became murderous and repressive and openly scapegoated LGBT people. He liked to call us worse than dogs. Robert Mugabe, 95.
Yeah. Not
Okay.
miss. In Chile, the government, the conservative government, which was sort of playing a cagey on marriage, has come out about how much it really opposes legalizing same-sex marriage, as the Senate there is moving ahead on legalizing it, although they did delay it a little, but they're going to have a vote in October that may move us forward on marriage there.
Very encouraging story in Brazil, in Rio. The mayor there, as an evangelical preacher, and he sent police into the International Book Fair to seize copies of a comic book with men kissing. And the police came up empty, and the judge barred him from further raids or from withdrawing the permit for it. The comic book was a 2010 Avengers, the Children's Crusade. Well, so the newspaper put it on the front page. You drew a lot of it. That's Hulking and Wiccan, who were boyfriends kissing. It sold out before the raid, but a second judge said gay and lesbian content for children should not be publicly displayed.
Too late.
The comedian Felipe Noto said he would distribute thousands of books with gay and lesbian characters with a label reading, inappropriate for backward, retrograde, and prejudiced people.
We were concerned about what would happen at the first Pride Parade in Sarajevo last weekend in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but all was quiet. Protests happened the day before, and the U.S. ambassador showed up to this march, Eric Nelson, with his partner Filippo Tattoni.
Yep, that's no, that's fine. Filippo Tattoni.
Okay.
At Eric Nelson's confirmation, which was only last year, he said, unfortunately, too many politicians continue to put zero-sum ethnic nationalism and their personal enrichment ahead of critical reforms. Who are you talking about?
I don't know. But if Rick Grinnell ends up as our next Homeland Security advisor, or whatever that is that they just got Bolton out of, we're in trouble.
So good on Sarajevo.
Yeah, in Gibraltar, the government will delete the option for registrars to opt out of performing same-sex marriages. Meanwhile, it hasn't been used in 3 years, so they figure, well, we don't really need it.
In Toronto, was a big protest at the opening of the Chick-fil-A by both animal rights groups and LGBT groups, yet there were big lines also for the chicken. We remind you that Popeyes also has a chicken sandwich now.
You're a big fan of Popeyes.
I haven't tried the chicken sandwich. They ran out.
Yes, they certainly did. In Kazakhstan, the great decision from the Supreme Court there, which overturned a lower court ruling, they ruled for the privacy rights of a lesbian couple who were kissing in a movie theater.
Yeah.
And some jerk pulled out a phone camera and started filming them and then posted it on Facebook. They have since been attacked and harassed and had death threats. And so they went to court against this guy, and the court said, you do have privacy rights. It may be too late on this, but this is not appropriate behavior.
The Undersecretary of State in Northern Ireland, Lord Duncan, who is gay, said same-sex marriages are going to begin in Valentine's Day. Full stop! Since there is no government up there in the UK. The UK Parliament managed to do this in July.
Yeah, they have to get through some date
October
in October.
21st.
Yes.
October 21st.
Yes.
They have a chance to form a government and stop it, but they
Highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. And in the UK, amidst all that government chaos about Boris Johnson, 200,000 people registered to vote in 72 hours in anticipation of an election. But I was somewhat discouraged to read. There was this one young guy, 17 years old, who had registered, who's going to be 18. No, he's 20, I'm sorry. But he said, I'll vote for either the Green Party or the Conservatives. Voting is a very idiosyncratic thing.
Democracy. In the Philippines, the very wacky President Duterte,
wacky? Scary.
Exactly, said, I'll certify a proposed law to outlaw discrimination on sexual orientation or gender identity as urgent. Why don't I believe him?
Now, we told you about in France a soccer game getting stopped because of homophobic chanting, but the head of the soccer federation there said, stop the games if it's racist chanting, but not homophobic chants. If it's homophobic signs, take them down. So there are a lot of calls for him to resign.
Yes. And in Uruguay, the government will recognize foreigners for same-sex marriages. I couldn't read the whole story. It's in Spanish. I don't read Spanish.
Right. And in Kenya, in Mojito, the First United Methodist Church is also the first African congregation to identify as what's called reconciling, accepting of gay people. And this started because they had a church member who had an intersex child in 1998 who was thrown out by her husband and said, we need to learn about sexuality, we accept you, and now they welcome everybody. There is hope.
Can we move on to AIDS news?
Please.
Well, a big U.S. conference on AIDS took place last week. Lots of diverse activists stormed the stage at the opening plenary, condemned the Centers for Disease Control, and its head, Dr. Robert Redfield, the director, because they think the CDC is not complaining enough about Truvada pricing and patent control, no trans women in epidemiological data, testing HIV genetics to target individual transmitters. They have a lot of complaints against the CDC under Trump. So then they got Redfield to sit down with them, and they had a meeting.
How did it go?
Well, no details on that yet. We'll see how it develops, but at least they did have the meeting.
Well,
very reminiscent of the old days.
Right. There was a big expose. Where was this? On Governor Rick Scott, he's a senator now in Florida. But it showed that he was forced to return $54 million in federal funds to combat HIV due to a deliberate failure by the state health department to secure legislative permission to spend the money. Yeah. And HIV rates have gone way up there. They also blocked CDC grants, applications in towns. I mean, it's really outrageous.
Refused to apply for Medicaid expansion.
They have the highest number of HIV cases in the country.
Well, this is what these Republican governors and politicians are doing all over the place.
The expose was in The Guardian in the United Kingdom, not here. Yeah. And Nancy Pelosi's got a new proposal to get prescription drugs lowered, and I hope that goes forward in a serious way.
Well, I'm sure it will go forward in the House,
we'll see.
We'll see what Mitch McConnell does.
All right, entertainment news?
Yes.
I see that Lehman Trilogy, which I saw in London and loved very much, is coming to Broadway in the spring at the Nederlander Theater. Previews from March 7th. That stars openly gay Simon Russell Beale. HBO's got a 4-part series on Catherine the Great with Helen Mirren, but it seems to focus on her affair with a guy.
Not the horse?
Not the horse or Princess Dashkova, who was a female lover.
Okay. And didn't you see a play,
I did.
Betrayal?
I saw Betrayal by Harold Pinter, one of his greatest plays. It's back on Broadway with Tom Hiddleston, who you know, and Charlie Cox and Zawe Ashton. It's directed by Jamie Lloyd. It's really kind of the best stage version I've seen, although I love the '83 movie, if you get a chance to see that, with Ben Kingsley and Jeremy Irons and Patricia Hodge. This one is bare stage. All the people stay on the stage practically the whole time, even though it's a love triangle.
People are getting lazy about sets. We'll have to ask Bruce about that.
This worked. Well, let's see what they do. But it's this is it's a play about cheating. It closes December 8th, and it's just terrific.
Okay. Anything else there?
No.
All right. So let's move to our very special guest.
And joining us now is Bruce Sussman, who is the co-author of more than 200 songs, many of which you know. The collaborator with Barry Manilow for 45 years.
Wow.
47 years.
47, yes.
Now it's 47. This is an old bio that your publicist sent.
Do the math, 72, 2019.
But you are here today to talk about a musical called Harmony, which has been kicking around for a few years and is coming to New York, and that's what we're excited about. And it's about a group of Jewish and Gentile singers who got together in the Gathering Storm in Germany when the Nazis were, right before the Nazis came on, and were an internationally famous singing group.
They were.
But welcome.
Thank you, neighbors.
Yes, we are
neighbors. And of course, we should mention that you are the husband of Rob Shooter.
I am.
Our beloved and occasional co-host.
Yes.
And so we're thrilled to have you
Rob
here.
Shooter of naughtygossip.com.
I'm thrilled to be here, but it feels odd without my dog. I always see you on the street with my dog.
And we've decided we only book people from London Terrace
Oh, good.
now.
Well,
Now it's your
you'll
turn.
never run out of guests.
It's true.
So before we start, before we get into all your background and everything else, I mean, let's talk about this show so we
Sure.
don't forget about it.
Sure.
Harmony.
Yes. Harmony tells the story, as you mentioned, of the comedian harmonists. Well, who are they? Because most of us have never heard of them.
True.
I know when I discovered the story about them, I didn't know anything about
We
them.
have a picture of them back then. You're going to put the picture up of the comedian harmonists?
Yes.
Yeah, there they are.
Well, that is the very photo that launched these 1,000 ships, because I saw that photo in the New York Times. It was a review of a documentary about them that was running down at the Public Theater. You may remember there used to be a screening room down there.
Yes.
And they did art films and documentaries. And the New York Times did a review of this documentary and ran that picture, that photo that you just put up. And I looked at that photo and I said, who are these people? Their hair brilliantined. It looked so 1930s, those gorgeous tuxedos they were wearing. And the headline was odd. The headline was Eberhard Fechner's epic documentary, The Comedian Harmonists at the Public. There were a lot of words in there I didn't recognize. Eberhard Fechner, who's he? Comedian harmonists, what an odd pairing of words.
Yeah.
Read the review, and it sounded very compelling. So I schlepped down to the Public Theater. I'll never forget it. It was a rainy, cold April night. Went down alone Tuesday night, and I watched 4.5 hours of German documentary making, in German with subtitles. Not my usual way to spend a Tuesday night.
But this wasn't 4.5 hours of them, was it?
It was.
Wow.
It was 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Well, 4.5 hours of their story.
Really?
With little excerpts of them and a lot of the recordings dubbed over it, and their wives and their daughters and all
They all
kinds
look
of.
gay to me.
They weren't.
Okay.
And I think everybody then looked gay.
Yes.
They were just so stylish.
Exactly.
They were so stylish.
Yes.
And I came out of there and I went to a payphone on Lafayette Street. Remember payphones?
Yes.
And I called Barry in California and I said, I think I found it. I said, I think I found the story we're looking for to write a musical. We'd been wanting to write a musical from the day we met. And this pop music thing was this amazing diversion. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about, but go get it.
And this was more than 20 years ago.
It was. And I started doing the research, and we started to write, and then we had our very first production in La Jolla in California, starring a then unknown Patrick Wilson.
Wow.
And Danny Burstein and Rebecca Luker, and a whole bunch of other fabulous people.
They should all come back.
They should all come back.
Yes.
And then we hit the commercial theater roadblocks, every one you can hit. And what people don't understand is that when a Broadway producer options your show, they get to renew the option 3 times. As long as they paid the option fee, you have no say in the matter. So if they get it, and if they don't do anything with it, you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs.
This kept the front runner off the screen for decades.
Right. So this just happened repeatedly. The interesting thing is, every time one of these options expired, there was someone else waiting to pick it up. So the interest in the piece never flagged. It was just we couldn't find people who could deliver. And now we appear to have. So.
And it got really well reviewed in
Yes.
those early productions
It did.
in La Jolla.
Yes.
And subsequently in Atlanta and whatever. But why, as they kept picking up these options, didn't it get to
Every time
fruition?
seemed to be a different set of circumstances. The first time we hit 9/11. And when 9/11 happened, all the rules changed about what was deemed commercial on Broadway. There was the era of the Twinkie musicals. It was the era of Mamma Mia and these shows that were wonderfully entertaining but didn't have a serious bone in their bodies. Well, we weren't that. We were something else.
Now we have Come From Away, the 9/11 musical,
right?
About people in Canada
absolutely
on flights.
Absolutely. So it's come around. More recently, the iteration before this. The three producers couldn't come to terms amongst themselves. They negotiated a deal amongst themselves for 2 years, and then it collapsed.
Well, so before we go into all the production stuff, let's first hear a little bit from them back then, and we're going to show more of your production, and then I want to hear more about them and draw people into this.
And who they were.
Let's
and what
listen
their
to the comedian harmonists. You get the idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they are described as doing sophisticated close harmonies and uproarious stage antics.
Yes.
We hear the harmonies. What were the uproarious stage antics?
It was, I like to say it was Marx Brothers meets the Manhattan Transfer.
Fabulous.
Yeah. That is one of the only surviving clips that exists.
Yeah.
And it's just them standing, must have been a benefit of some kind, standing around a piano and singing. A little further on in the clip, one of them, Harry, comes forth and begins to do his comic routine. One of their legendary trademarks was mimicking the sounds of musical instruments. And one of the things they would do is at intermission, coming back from intermission, the lights would be down and you would hear what you thought was a chamber orchestra playing the overture to the Barber of Seville. And slowly the lights would come up and it was just the six of them replicating the sounds of musical instruments.
So they're a great group and they're a very successful group. Was there any consciousness of, we're going to have half Jews and half Gentiles in this group?
Yeah, well, who are the Jews and who are the Gentiles is actually a plot point in the piece that I'm not going to spoil here. And how many of each there were is another plot point. To complicate things, one of the Jewish members married a Gentile woman and one of the Gentile members married a Jewish woman.
But was it a conscious effort to overcome anti-Semitism, or it was like, we don't even think about anti-Semitism, we're just guys who know each other and we're going to be in the group?
We are talented guys who are getting along with each other. They were the antithesis of the Third Reich. They were the poster children for what Germany could have been rather than what Germany became. They were incredibly diverse. It was a Polish rabbi, a Bulgarian singing waiter, a German doctor, an Italian opera singer, a whorehouse pianist. I mean, they were just six diverse guys of every stripe who
It
came
does sound like the Marx Brothers.
Yes, who came together and created this phenomenon. And what a unique idea it was to sing the repertoire they sang and the way they sang it, and then to add comedy to it.
And they played all over the world, didn't they?
International success. They hold records to this day in some countries around the world for record sales. And this is at a time when the record industry was at its infancy.
Now, at what point do the Nazis come in? And what happens? Their
rise to fame from impoverished street musicians to successful cabaret performers to international recording artists. They made 13 films with the likes of Josephine Baker and Marlene Dietrich and others.
Wow.
And performed in the greatest concert halls in the world, La Scala. They came to America. They toured America. They toured Australia. Their rise to fame climaxed the year that Hindenburg appointed Hitler chancellor in 1933, the very month, as a matter of fact. And that was when even then, because there had been so many governments in so many months, they just didn't believe this one was going to last. But right at that point, they began to realize there was going to be some trouble. And then the axe fell. They got a letter from the Reichsminister of Music or Culture, I forget which department, saying they could not perform with the current personnel. They couldn't perform songs composed by Jews with lyrics by Jews or published by Jews.
What's left?
They had one song in the repertoire that was left.
Wow.
That was it. One song. Everything else had to go. And because Harry, who was perhaps the greatest comedian among them, because Harry was the arranger and he was Jewish, all the arrangements had to go. And this used to be a line in our show, and we had to cut it because it got an unwanted laugh. The letter also said, you can't use the name comedian harmonist anymore. We suggest the master sextet. It was so ridiculously ironic that we used to get a laugh, and we had to remove it. But that's what happened. In fact, when the Jewish members fled, the non-Jewish members put together found 3 more members and put together another group, and but it was over. They just couldn't recapture the glory of the early days.
I don't know if you deal with it in the show, but what became of them?
We do deal with it in the show, and I don't want to go into it too much, but it was. I think only one of them really found a fully integrated life after this. This happened when they were very young. And it was astonishing success. And to this day, if you go to Germany, if you go to the equivalent of Tower Records in Germany, there will be a whole wall full of comedian harmonist albums. And there are imitator groups like Beatlemania that do the comedian harmonist repertoire all around Germany, but not beyond that. The story was successfully, their records were destroyed, their movies were destroyed. It became a crime against the Reich to play them.
So let's talk about this show, your show, and let's introduce it with a little clip that the Playbill folks have put together.
This was our time. Harmony, did we have harmony? But that's just about all we had. Suddenly, a little harmony, and the poverty's not so bad. Then we were poor as sin in Berlin. We were patches on our pants. Mercifully, when you're in harmony, you're in a trance. Others went marching, not us, we danced. Oi!
Okay.
Well, you asked about set.
Fading out, yes.
It does have the set.
That makes you unique these days, I think, on Broadway.
First of all,
Not on Broadway, sorry.
well, not yet.
Exactly.
We'll see.
So let's talk about, also to remind people where it's going to be.
Yes. Some people may know that there's a spectacular revival of Fiddler on the Roof around these days.
Yiddish?
In Yiddish, yes.
Just splendid. I loved it. I don't know how you felt about it, but I was crazy about it. And that was done by the National Yiddish Theater downtown. It actually started down there, and then they moved it uptown. And they approached us and asked us if they could get involved with Harmony. At the time, we had just met a new commercial producer who was interested, Ken Davenport, and we said, National Yiddish Theater, Ken Davenport, go talk.
But you're going to do it
Ken is an award-winning, celebrated producer.
But it's going to be performed at
the National Yiddish Theater downtown, 36 Battery Place.
At the Museum of Jewish Heritage.
The Museum of Jewish Heritage, which has a beautiful. Have you been down there?
Just to the general area.
It's
to the museum.
There's a beautiful theater called Safra Hall down there. That's where we'll be. It's where Fiddler started, and we'll be there from February 11th for 8 weeks. And there's more information at harmonyanewmusical.com.
Yes, which has been on the screen all the time you're talking.
Great.
So that people can get more information.
So is the 20 years it's taken to get this production here to New York really because of those options and the producers? Is there any other?
That's pretty much it. I mean, along the way, it's been a journey for us to, for every reincarnation, to revisit the show and see what can we what can we adjust? And also every new director that comes on has an idea about how he or she might like to do it, so we make adjustments along the way.
And do you think the timing now is ironically appropriate?
Our director just said that to us. He said, I know the agony of what it's been like, the frustration of not being able to get the show to New York. He said, but now that you have, he said the timing may be the best timing you could have possibly imagined.
Jews and Gentiles together.
Yes.
Now, they had their own songs, but Barry Manilow is the composer on this.
Right.
So what did...
Barry did the music, you did the lyrics and the book.
And the book. We have to remember there was an era before jukebox musicals, and it's funny how many people say, oh, you're not doing the comedian harmonist repertoire. Well, no, we're not, but nor did they in Funny Girl or Gypsy or The Sound of Music.
Yeah.
We didn't do the Von Trapp family repertoire, and we didn't do the Fanny Brice repertoire in the stage play anyway. So it was an original musical, and we decided since there was no Over the Rainbow, there was no song that was so phenomenally well known by people outside of Germany, that this was a good opportunity for us to attempt to replicate the sort of thing they did, and also make a slight adjustment for a 21st century ear.
Then you let them speak English.
Well, yes, but the conceit of our show they're speaking German, but because they're all speaking German, there's no accent. So so that's when they speak English in our show, when they're in New York and they say hello, New York, we are the community, then they have an accent because they're speaking.
I see. Yeah, I see.
Well, it's very exciting to hear about this and hear what's coming. But you, in spite of being the co-author with Barry Manilow of Copacabana, which is in all our heads eternally, this is not your entire career. You've worked with many other people and done many other shows.
You did my favorite musical, Whoop-de-Doo.
Oh, that was
Howard
fun.
Crabtree's Whoop-de-Doo.
Yeah.
Wonderful costume show and songs, funny.
It was a great idea,
hilarious.
wasn't it?
It was such a surprise to sit down. It was all about crazy costumes and funny songs.
Yes.
And I just kind of went out of obligation because it was cross-dressing and all this other kind of stuff, and it was just a revelation.
It was fun. We were invited to submit a couple of songs for it, and it was great fun. We really had a good time with that one. And then I got to work with the late Wendy Wasserstein.
Yes.
Also, we did her first musical. It was her only musical until recently, until right before she died. But that was an amazing journey as well.
Oh, so. For the next 50 years, you're going to keep doing this, or?
Kanahara. Yeah. This is, I don't think songwriters retire. I think you just stop at some point. You die. I don't know.
Please don't. I think this is all very exciting, and you have gotten great audience reaction to Harmony.
And the advance, I can't believe it's 5.5, 6 months away, and tickets are selling and already. So it's just. It's amazing. I'm very gratified.
Well, it's got 20 years of word of mouth on this.
Well, there's that. Yes, there is that, and I think some people are coming out of curiosity, and there are also some people who actually know the story, and it always amazes me when I run into anybody who does. I just met a producer at CBS, and he came up to me and said, "You're doing the Comedian Harmonist story?" I said, "Yes." He said, "They're my favorite group ever." I said, "How did you know about them?" I said, "I didn't." It was one of the reasons why.
How did he know about them if everything that they ever did was destroyed?
Well, because the people hid their 78s under their beds.
The records.
Yes, and then after the war, they took the records out and they got remastered, and you can get CDs now. There are hundreds of recordings like the one you played that you can get on CD.
Well, it's called The Comedian Harmonist. It's coming up in February.
It's Harmony.
Harmony. I'm sorry, the show is called Harmony.
Right.
The group is called Comedian Harmonist. Harmony!
Right.
And the website is harmonyanewmusical.com for more information about this and how you can see it.
And that's going to be downtown at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, 39 Battery Place?
36
Battery Place. Thank you, Bruce. Watch out, we're going to have you and Rob co-host here, and we're going to abscond.
We're going to have a ball.
Can we do songs?
And then you can do your song
You can do anything you want.
Thanks.
But meanwhile, we'll be back next week. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
36.